have a question for you as we begin this week's Living Torah. Just how many times have those with golden calves judged others with golden calves? How many times have people that have golden calves pointed out the golden calves in another person's life and not seen the golden calves in their own life? And further probing, meddling question, how many of us are guilty of doing the same thing? I got to raise probably both hands on that one. So this may be a good place that instead of examining the splinter in another people's eyes, we look a little bit more at the log, the 2x4, the 4x4, the large pine tree that's in our own eyes. But before we get there, I want to go to, of course, the beginning of this is when you take, or kitisa, and of course that's not really what the word means in Hebrew. The beginning word there is nasa, when you lift up. And it is, yes, transliterated into English as N-A-S-A, which just coincidentally, I guess, has to do with a pretty famous government agency of NASA, which is about what? Lifting up things from the earthly realm into a space realm. Okay, now, of course, I'll just let your mind wander if you want to with that one, and let's move on. But this is about, well, let's go to something. The first use of this word is in the account of Cain and Abel. When Cain kills Abel and he says, is this judgment, this is much more than I can bear. This is more than I can lift up. The second instance is, I think, a little bit more of, it speaks to me at least a little bit more, and it's in Genesis chapter 7, verse 17, and it says that the ark was raised up, it was bared up, it was lifted up by the floodwaters of judgment upon the earth. Now consider this in the Hebrews, in the life of the Hebrews, is that the judgment that as they were slaves in Egypt, the judgment that came upon Egypt was what was used to raise them up and to bring them to a new status, to a status change. Could that be something that is speaking to us today? It should, at least, that which is upon the earth today, the judgment, or judgments, definitely plural, that we see happening around us today. This is about something that should cause us to raise our heads, or as Yeshua says in Matthew chapter 24, I believe it is, or Luke 21, lift up your heads. When you see these things happen, lift up your heads, nasa. Lift up your heads. Look to the spiritual realm in order to understand the physical realm that you're living in. So when it says you are to take a census, this is not about counting people. This is about people understanding that they are counted. Let's take a run at that one again. This is not about counting people. This is about people understanding that they are counted in the midst of this group of people called the Hebrews. We have some, 600,000 people that are there, but in the taking of the census and the sanctuary shekel, it is about every single person being counted and being counted equally. Now, this does not mean that we have the United States Constitution that says all men are created equal. Well, we have to look and say, well, you look around and it does not appear that that is actually a true statement. Let's consider it from a biblical basis. All women are created equal in their ability to fulfill their calling. Every person, if we look at the talents, the parable of the talents, every person has a calling in life. And the key to life is figuring out what talent you have, what gifting you have, and that you count in something. So this is about a realization of a status change for each of these people, that they were not to look at themselves anymore as slaves, but they were to look at themselves as free men who had now been purchased by their Creator. We could consider it like this. There's an old song, I'm just a sinner, saved by grace. Remember that? The Cathedrals sang that song, and it was a great song. But I believe that it is, and I understand the title, I understand the words, yes, I got that. But I think that the ending result of the song leaves us a little bit short of where we actually should be. Because if we consider ourselves, I'm just a sinner that was saved by grace, then how are we going to live? Probably going to live more like a sinner than what we've been called to, which is a Tzaddikim. So a more accurate, and that word Tzaddikim is saint, of course, but a more accurate song would be, I am, not just, but I am a Tzaddikim. I am counted righteous in Messiah. I am a Tzaddikim who has been brought to the status change from sinner to Tzaddikim by the grace and mercy of the Creator himself. Now, that's just the kind of the first word of this Torah portion. We go from there, and I'm going to jump around a little bit because I have a lot to go to a place that, as each part of the tabernacle to me is just intriguing. There's so much in the Mishkan, but the basin of bronze, the laver, is one that I can look at this. You go online. Maybe this would be a good piece of homework for you. Go online and just type in image of the basin in the tabernacle, something similar to those words, and you're going to find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of images of what the person that has created that image thinks it looks like. I've gone to the Temple Institute in Israel. I've seen the one that they have, and it's intriguing in what is there. I've seen various ideas of what the concept of the brazen laver was about. But here's the most interesting thing to me is that, okay, good, Kathy. So I thought she might be taking Kaya for a walk there. Here's one of the most interesting things to me about the brazen laver is that we're not told the dimensions. Okay, go back just a couple of chapters to the altar of incense. Go to the altar of sacrifice. Go to the ark. All of those different pieces of the Mishkan have dimensions, that everything is to be built exactly as the blueprint is. Now, Moshe saw something in the spiritual realm, and so he was to pattern it after that. And I would imagine that it had the same dimensions, maybe not exactly dimensions as in physical, inches and feet and yards and gallons and all that kind of thing, but it had the same caricature. It looked the same, but it was now in an earthly realm. That's not what this is bringing us to. What this is bringing us to is that the water, so the Torah is, of course, one of the synonyms for Torah. We have it as life, it is is light. One of the synonyms for Torah is water. The brazen laver was to speak to us of the cleansing water for those that are redeemed. Okay, keep in mind that the altar of sacrifice is prior to the brazen laver. This in itself, for those that would say, well, you're just trying to, you've forgotten about Messiah and the blood of Messiah and all those things. All you have to do is take them to Exodus and point them to the tabernacle. Bring up an image of the tabernacle and say, no, here it is. I'm living this, that I enter in, I go to the altar of sacrifice first, before I go to the laver. So it is about our redemption that brings forth the word, which is the continual cleansing for our lives and the instructions for us to move on toward his presence. Very simple picture, but when the Torah is done away with, what do? You've done away with the pictures. You've done away with how you get everything, so you come up with a puzzle that in the end might look like a golden calf. More on that later. It had no dimensions, which is what the Torah is all. There's no dimensions. Has anyone ever come to the end? If you think, well, I've read the Torah 15 times and I know everything it says. Well, who's the, let's tone this one down. Who's the not too smart person in the room right there? Because what you've done, you've said, I have come to an equal understanding of the Creator that the Creator has. Because that's the revelation that is in the Torah. And as commercial message, I just did a message, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And it is about this concept that if we're not looking at the Messiah if we don't have a foundation of our image of the Messiah in the Torah, and over in the book of Yochanan, John, he says, if you have seen me, you've seen the Father. Then if we have a skewed image of the Messiah, what does that lead to? A skewed image of the Father. And then it goes into deception and us then serving another Elohim. That's the message. You can go on our website and you can order it, okay? Moving on from there. So the basin has no dimensions, like the Torah has no dimensions. And in the basin, the priest, the priest that had the blood on their hands, their feet, okay, because it's a bloody business there, the altar of sacrifice, they go to the altar and what do? They wash their hands and they wash their feet, which is about their walk, and it is about their doing. Okay, the hands about their doing, the feet is about their walk. Now, get this picture. That back at the altar, the blood was applied to their thumb, their ear, their thumb, and their toe. But then the water was applied continually. This is a great picture. The blood is applied, the blood of Messiah, the blood of the covenant is applied to our lives one time. But then we need continual cleansing. So if, this is something for you to consider with Pesach coming up very rapidly, that if maybe there's some things in your life that are just not going quite the way that you feel that they should. Maybe there's some issues, some things you can't figure out. Would this be a good time for a mikvah? You know you're redeemed. At least I hope you do. I pray you do. If you don't, call me. We'll walk through those steps. But here you've been redeemed, but life is, I don't know. And so this is a good time to go to the laver. Go to the Word, yes, but then the Word will bring you to the natural waters of the mikvah to once again line you with the spiritual waters of the Torah. Okay, something to consider. In verse 31, okay, got to go all the way to chapter 31, we see these two guys, Bezalel and Ohaviah, their names meaning a shadow of Yah and Father's tent. We can go into that for a few days on that one, but here's what I want to go to this week. Back to Nasa. Okay, they were raised up for a purpose. They were not raised up just for the sake of the raising. They were raised up for a purpose, and that purpose was introduced to them after the offering. Now, there's one to consider, that chapter 25 of Exodus, Shemot, comes before chapter 31. Okay, didn't even have to get a calculator on that one. Some would today. So chapter 25, those who wholeheartedly want to give, comes before chapter 31. Is it possible that chapter 31 is tied to chapter 25? That it was about the Ohavia and Bezalel. I wonder what their offering looked like. Not in amount, okay? Not in amount. I'm not saying they gave more than everyone else, but maybe they gave more than everyone else. Maybe there was something about their giving. Maybe it may not have been that they had more to give or even proportionately had more to give. That they said, well, I'm not just giving this amount. I'm not just giving 10%. I'm giving 12% or 15 or whatever. It may not have had anything to do with that. Maybe it was that they brought their offering with more of themselves along with it. I mean, it's speculation, okay? But here's the thing. All had a purpose. Everyone that's in the camp was told to raise their heads. They all had a purpose, and their purposes were equal. This would be a hard concept to consider, that you have Bezalel, who's the artist and doing all these things, and then you got the guy out there that's chopping down the acacia wood tree. He doesn't have the ability that Bezalel does. But yet, Bezalel's very position and calling in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is dependent upon the guy chopping the tree, and we don't know what his name is. We don't know anything about him. And that guy chopping down the tree is dependent upon his wife cooking the manna, or doing whatever she did with the manna, making some pancake, manna waffles in the morning, so that he would have the energy to go out and chop the tree down, so that Bezalel could take the tree and make it into what would be the ark and the different things in the tabernacle. And this is dependent on maybe the kids going out in the morning and collecting the manna. And we don't know their names either. So see, everyone has a purpose, and their calling is equal in that each person has something to do. There's an interesting rabbinical story about this, that if a rabbi is walking down the street, I'm not saying I agree, disagree, this is just a story, okay? Like it, keep it, don't like it, forget I ever said it. But a rabbi is walking down the street. He walks by a blacksmith shop. The blacksmith is taking a break. He's sitting out on the little bench there in front of the blacksmith shop, and he sees the rabbi coming by. He is to stand in respect for the rabbi's position. But if he is engaged in his occupation, he's actually, standing there over the anvil or whatever, and he's banging out something. If he looks up and sees the rabbi, he is not to cease from his work, but he is to continue in his work, therefore saying the callings are the same, but there is a place of respect. So though the calling of the guy that's chopping down the acacia tree is the same as Bezalel, there should be a respect, because Bezalel is actually, his calling is allowing the tree chopper guy's calling to have greater significance. Okay, get a hold of that. The guy could be chopping down a tree, acacia wood tree, and bringing it home to, to his tent and, cooking a meal or warming themselves around a fire in the desert at night. That's significant for his family. But Bezalel's calling is allowing him to have a calling that is elevating his calling to a greater significance than he would have had. And this is where your pastors, your leaders, your teachers, I don't deserve respect because of who I am. Okay, I should never ask for respect just because of what my name is, just because of what I do on a weekly basis. That should never give me a place of respect. The respect should be that and God willing this happens, the respect should be because what I'm doing allows you to, or pushes you to elevate your calling to a greater level, not just leave you at the level you think you should be at. Because the guy chopping the tree probably never thought of himself as worthy of doing anything for the Mishkan. It's Bezalel that is elevating his calling. Okay, I hope you got a little bit of that. And by the way, folks, there wasn't any notes about what I just said right there. So, that's one of those that I'm going to be thinking about later on. So everybody had purpose. The tragedy of life, let me give you one of the greatest tragedies of life. And this comes from spending a lot of time listening to Dr. Miles Monroe of blessed memory, one of my mentors of life. The greatest tragedy in life, in my opinion, is living without ever understanding why. See, most people live to exist, to get a job, go through a routine that we're going to do. I'm going to get up and do this, and this, and then the night comes, go to sleep, and get up and do the next thing all over, exactly what they did the day before, but never knowing why. This is a tragedy of a job. A job puts you into a routine that never seeks to elevate you into what you could have been. This is why the scripture talks more about entrepreneurism. The United States was built on entrepreneurism. Why? Because that entrepreneuric, is that a word? That idea, I'm not going to say that word again because I don't know if it is a word. I don't think it is, but now that I've said it, maybe it is. That spirit, what does it do? It elevates people. The spirit that is today controlling much of the United States, the world, in fact, is one that seeks to keep people down to a level instead of elevate them to another level. All right, this is all in this. Now, we go from there to Shabbat. All right, and it starts out with, you are to observe or you are to guard my Shabbats. It's the plural in the beginning there. At least I didn't look back at the Hebrew in this, but in verse 13, you are to observe my Shabbats, for this is a sign between you and throughout all your generations, so that you will know I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh who set you apart. We have Shabbats, and it goes into and brings it down to Shabbat, the Shabbat that we walk out, we guard on a weekly basis. Now, this is kind of a fascinating placement in Scripture here that we have. You are to guard my Shabbats and my Shabbat, and it's right after the instructions of the Mishkan. It's right after the calling of those who will be in charge of the Mishkan, which says if you think you're getting behind in your work, on the Mishkan during the 6 days, you're not to carry that work over on the 7th and try to catch up. That the Shabbat is what, we could say, I guess we could go here, the Shabbat is what holds everything else together. Notice it didn't say that the Mishkan is to be the sign. I mean, here's this enclosure, here's this tent, here's these pieces that are in there, and you got this cloud of fire and a pillar of fire that's coming down in the middle of it, and you would think that somebody walking in the camp would go, wow, now that's a sign of Yud He Vav He in your midst. That the glory, or as we would say in the Pentecostal, the glory. I've been with Barry Phillips this weekend. I guess some of it rubbed off a little bit. The glory in the camp. We would say, well, that's the sign. But the scripture says the Shabbat's the sign. The keeping of Shabbat, the guarding of Shabbat is the sign. Now, Shabbat, let's go here for a moment. Shabbat's just not just about changing what we did on Sunday to what we do on Saturday. It's not just about taking church from Sunday and moving church to Saturday. Because in the end, you can still have, dare we say, a golden calf. Shabbat's about a lifestyle. Shabbat is about, it's what distinguishes us. It is that time period that we have of resting, of seeking Him, of being in His presence. And by the way, commercial message here, if you're on Facebook and you haven't left for some reason, whatever, but if you have access to Facebook and you can go back to my page, on last Shabbat, Daniel, our son Daniel and Barry led worship together. It was the first time that had ever happened. They had never done that before, and it was over the top. I mean, I'm kind of proud of both of them, but it was absolutely, it was great. And then Barry's message about the spirit of Lot, and how we have veils. People become veils over our eyes, which hold us back. You need to listen to that message. Now, the word sign is in Hebrew is the word ot, O-T, all right, but it is Aleph, Vav, and Tav. So Aleph, Tav, wow. Aleph, Tav, the beginning and end, not the Alpha and Omega, the Aleph and Tav. I'm the strength of the covenant. And there's a Vav between the two, so Shabbat is to be looked at as that which is connecting us to the strength of the covenant. It's a distinguishing mark. The root word of ot, which is spelled exactly the same, by the way, has the connotation of coming into agreement with something. So this is the Vav, that we are coming into agreement with the strength of the mark, the strength, the ox, the covenant, the mark. We're coming into agreement and therefore being joined into the mark of the covenant of Him. So somebody comes into the camp, they're not to look, they're going to see the tabernacle, and they're going to go, what are you guys doing? Well, it's Shabbat. What's that? Well, from the beginning, back before there were Hebrews, before there were Jews, there was just Adam and Hava at that time. And all the way back there, he said, he's put into the creation, you're to take the Shabbat. You're to take that day, and you're to take that time and set it apart, because in the setting apart, you're going to become set apart. In the first instance of this verse this word is in Bereshit chapter 1 verse 14, And you can read this about the signs in the heavens. Okay, it says that the stars, that all that has been created is to be a sign, is to be signs. We could go to, E.W. Bullinger's book of Witness in the Stars, all that's going on. There's a lot happening in the stars and the planets right now. And this is all to be about a sign. So Shabbat, consider this, that Shabbat is the mark in time that joins our earthly realm to come into agreement with the heavenly realm. The Shabbat, or the sign of the covenant, is first in the heavenly realm and then is brought into the earthly realm. This dawned on me just a few days ago. It's one of those things that I knew but I didn't know. You ever had one of those? You ever had something that you knew but you didn't know? And all of a sudden you know it, so now you know it, and it's like a revelation? Yeah. I've been reciting the Shema, twice a day for I don't know how many years now. And we have the Shema Israel page on Facebook, and over a couple thousand people around the world now that stop and what they're doing and recite the Shema, or at least they've committed to. Hopefully a few of these people are continuing in on this. And it all of a sudden dawned on me that no matter what my life is, and sometimes my life is a little on the strange side, but no matter where my life is going, what's happening around me, twice a day, 2 times a day, 9 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I come into agreement with the spiritual realm. See, the Shema, hear, O Israel, Adonai, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That is a declaration that is already truth in the spiritual realm. Yeah, think about it. That's truth. But when we declare it, it's not a prayer, it's a declaration. So when we declare it in the earthly realm, what are we doing? We are bringing together. This is really remarkable. We are bringing together the spiritual realm. We are bringing the spiritual realm and the natural realm in agreement with one another. Now, Barry and I, we did some spiritual things this weekend while he was here. Yes, we talked to some spiritual things. We also played golf. Okay, we went up to we got rained out here, so we went up to a course up in Waynesville area that was established. I didn't even know that it existed. It was established in 1919. So in North Carolina in 1919, and we're on the backside. I think we're on hole 10 or something, 12, irrelevant. And my alarm goes off. It's 3 o'clock, and I said, Barry, how many times do you think that the spiritual realm, the Shema, has been recited on this course? He went, probably never. Well, it was then. We had this amazing opportunity that which was there. Get this, okay? I mean, I think this way. What I'm saying is not just some hooey. I really believe this to be true. That the creation that is there at that hole understands, okay, this is not New Age, but is in tune with the spiritual realm. But what we did in reciting the Shema there was we were able to connect the realms together by our declaration. Okay, hope you got that. Well, moving on to, here it is, the golden calf. Now, this to me has always seemed like the greatest sin. That's what has been portrayed, the greatest sin. Well, it appears in reading Scripture that the golden calf in the end did not keep them out of the promised land, out of Canaan. It was the bad report that kept them out of Canaan, right? The golden calf is about his character. The bad report is about his word, his promises. Is he more concerned about his word than his character? Because those that uphold his word will eventually line up the correct character. The golden calf, what's the golden calf about? I'm not going to get into details here. The golden calf is about a people who were continuing to look back at Egypt. And there were statues in Egypt to this unknown, this guy Pharaoh, who they were told was a god, but they never saw him. They saw representation in the statues of the god that they were told was in the palace. But they never saw him, just the representation. Now Moshe is up on the mountain, and he's getting the revelation. Well, they get a little impatient and said, okay, we need to do what we did in Egypt. We need an earthly representation on earth. Well, there was to be, and there was in the revelation of the Torah is about the earthly representation. This is in my The Word Became Flesh message. There is a revelation of the representation of the earthly manifestation. It's called Yeshua. But instead of waiting for that revelation, they came up with a revelation of their own, which was a golden calf. So Aaron, he comes up with this brilliant idea because of the pressure of the people, and he takes an offering. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this as someone who teaches on offerings. There are offerings you should give to, and there are offerings you shouldn't give to. Make sure that when you give an offering, it's not going to a golden calf. Yeah. Golden calf offerings. Got a lot to do here. Golden calf offerings are normally driven by emotion and not truth. I would say about 99.9% of the time, golden calf offerings are driven by emotion and not truth. Exodus 25 is driven by those who wholeheartedly want to give. It's truth. The golden calf offering is driven by emotion. Well, in the end, as Aaron would say, threw in the earrings and stuff, and out popped the calf. Aaron, think through that one a little bit better, okay? We're all guilty, folks. We're all guilty of the golden calf. So what they did, they made this golden calf, and they said, that is Yud He Vav He. There's the sin. Is they had taken the image of the system of Egypt and brought that into their system of freedom. We need to leave the images behind. Don't bring them where we're at. Okay, leave them back there in Egypt where they belong. Don't bring those same images into this time, into the freedom of moving toward the full promises of the covenant and the land. They end up with an image, a graven image, their own image. Now, the scripture is clear in Exodus chapter 20, you're not to make a graven image of your own, of all of these different things. They haven't got the memo yet or the tablets yet. It hasn't been transmitted. So here we are. They've already started to do this. But instead of pointing the fingers at them, let's take a look at this. How many of us, how many of me, there's only one, have golden images? graven images, golden calves. You know, here's something I said in my, not turn this all into a commercial. This is something I said in my my message on the flesh, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I want my path to be, as I'm heading toward the promises, to the land, I want that this journey that I'm on to be very similar to like Hansel and Gretel. In that, you remember the story, that story of Hansel and Gretel, how the breadcrumbs, they left the breadcrumbs along the path. Here's what I want my path to be marked by: dust of golden calves. I want there to be a very clear trail of golden calf dust, so that by the time I get, you know, and that trail would, as I get closer to the end than the beginning, that there's not as much dust in the end on the trail. The beginning of the trail is very easy to find because it's got like mounds of golden calf dust. But by the time you get closer to where you can actually see the destination, a person following you should be able to see, wait a minute, there's not as much golden dust, you know, golden calf dust to follow, but by that time they can look to the destination and see it on the horizon. Right. Now this begins this negotiation time between Moshe and Yah of, you know, okay, these are a stiff-necked people. You take them. I ain't gonna mess with them anymore. And the you know, Moshe could have said, hey, I'm all for that. Okay, let's have it go from, you know, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's have it just, you know, cut them out, and we'll do the Elohim of Moshe. That sounds good. Boy, that's got a ring to it. And he says, no, we're not going to move. We're not going to change anything. This is a test, not of the word of Yah. This is a test of Moshe. This is his test. And his test is in the end. If you don't go with us, we're not going anywhere. If you don't go with us, I'm staying right here. That should be our mantra today. Is if you don't go with us, we're staying right here. Okay. Now this ends up with a revelation that is fascinating. What revelation? What is your revelation of the Almighty? Now, we all have skewed revelations, okay? If we were to say, well, here's the revelation of what I think he is based upon our experiences of life, our hurts of life, all these kind of things. If you were to ask me, you know, what's my revelation of me? Or if I was to ask you, what's your revelation of you? You'd probably come up with something that's a little skewed. It wouldn't be really accurate because you were looking at it through a lens. So if you want to have an accurate revelation of who he is, you don't ask a person who doesn't have an accurate revelation of who they are. You ask him, who does not have a skewed revelation of who he is. He has an accurate revelation of who he is. And that's found in Exodus chapter 34. And in starting in verse 8, Adonai passed before him and proclaimed Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Adonai is Elohim. Here it is. He is merciful. He is compassionate, slow to anger, rich in grace and truth, showing grace or favor to the 1,000th generation, forgiving offenses, crimes, and sins, yet not exonerating the guilty, but causing the negative effects of the parents' offenses to be experienced by the children and grandchildren, and even to the third and fourth generation. You know, you want to give your children and grandchildren a great gift? Live a life that is according to the Scripture. That's greater than any inheritance you can possibly give to them, is a so-called godly life. So there's an accurate description. Notice that one, slow to anger. He's not waiting up there like, whack-a-mole. Not waiting for you to just kind of pop up and he whacks you on the head. He's slow to anger. Thank him he is. He's compassionate. Go back and get a hold of these. Read this thing over and over and over again until it starts to sink in and change the image of who we think we have him as. Now, here's a verse for you. In verse 9, at once Moshe bowed his head to the ground, prostrated himself, and said, if I have now found favor in your view, Yahweh, then please let Yahweh go with us. Even though they are a stiff-necked people, if I have found favor in your view, Adonai, then please let Adonai go with us, even though they are a stiff-necked people, and pardon our offenses and our sin, and take us as your possession. You know what that is? It's the sinner's prayer. What's called the sinner's prayer has, forgive me of my sin. I give my life unto you. I know that I've been stiff-necked. I've been hard-hearted. I know I've sinned. Please forgive me and move me forward from here and take me as yours. Ladies and gentlemen, the sinner's prayer did not originate right of Matthew. It originated left of Matthew. In fact, I think it originated in the garden, not in words, but in deed, when Adam and Hava, Adam and Eve, took the garment from the Creator unto themselves. That was an act of the sinner's prayer, but now we have it recorded in a little greater revelation. And then as Scripture continues, we'll find greater revelation, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same basis of redemption. One last thing. As he went up, Moshe went back up on the mountain, and he was up there for 40 days and 40 nights and didn't eat or drink. Wow, imagine that. That he entered into a realm in that his natural man was so overcome by his spiritual man that it caused his natural man to not even need the very sustenance that he was created originally to have. And because of this, his face shone. And Brad Scott of blessed memory did amazing teaching on this, some different twists and turns. I think you can still go to wildbranch.org and maybe find that teaching. But when's the last time we spent time with him to the point that people could see it in our face? Well, I guess that's a good place to stop. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.